The war between Russia and Ukraine is in full swing and seems to be coming to a climax. Today in the video, you will learn about how real the Russian offensive from the three operational directions is, which we have been hearing about very often lately. The Ukrainian military leadership declares that Russia is preparing a new large-scale offensive at the beginning of next year. According to various sources, it may start at the end of January, beginning of March from the southern direction, or from the territory of Belarus. At the same time, according to the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, with a high probability the occupiers will again try to take Kyiv. At the same time, the White House does not see any signs of preparations for a new offensive, and media sources in the State Department report that Russia is divided on whether it should even be launched in the coming months. From the latest data, we know that Kyiv fears Russia has a plan to encircle Ukraine with a terrifying gallop of troops on three sides. One direction, namely the east and the Donbass, has been under incredible pressure for almost half a year, since the beginning of autumn. The past battle for Soledar, which ended with the success of the Russian troops, and the future huge battle for Bakhmut, will be key in determining who will succeed in this direction. Ukraine plans to keep a mobile defense in order to weaken the offensive potential of the enemy, which has mobilized an additional 150,000 troops to carry out offensives. Ukrainian ex-politician and military expert Alexei Arestovich stated that before mobilization in the Russian Federation, there were about 150,000 military on the territory of Ukraine. Now this number exceeds 300,000, and the Russian Federation plans to increase this number by another 150,000 personnel, which will certainly provide problems for Ukraine, since she has to hold over 1,300 kilometers of front on level ground, and the Russian Federation has a mobilization reserve 3 times larger than Ukraine. Kyiv's fears are quite justified. Rustem Umerov, a member of the team negotiating with Russia, said the Kremlin might be preparing for a fresh advance. He said that Ukraine was threatened from many directions, but did not specify where the attacks could come from. Russians are encircling us from 240 degrees, attacking from the Black Sea, from Belarus, and the Luhansk and Donetsk regions, Umerov said. Russia declared its first victory in the war for months this week, claiming they had taken the salt mining town of Soledar and Donetsk. There is still some dispute as to whether fighting continues for control of the town, but the Russians have clearly made territorial gains at huge cost. A new Russian offensive appears to be imminent. That's why Ukraine says it needs as many tanks as possible. From the latest information that comes from various sources, we can conclude that Russia has also become more active in the southern direction and is making attempts to attack the Ukrainian regional center of Zaporozhye. From this, it is known that now Ukraine will have to contain 2 operational areas, Donetsky and Zaporozhye. Thus, Kyiv is counting on the supply of armored vehicles from its Western partners in order to prepare for a Russian attack. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, secretly met with CIA Director William Burns and discussed with him expectations regarding further actions of the Russian army. The Ukrainian authorities do not rule out that Russian President Vladimir Putin will dare to repeat a major offensive, and calls on the West not to delay military assistance. The Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Oleksiy Reznikov, does not rule out that the Russians may launch an offensive in the south and east of Ukraine in the spring. Spring is the best time to resume the offensive for all parties. We understand that they will be ready to launch, and of course we must be ready to launch, the minister said. According to him, the Russian Federation may try to gather forces, ammunition and weapons for a new offensive. However, Reznikov believes that the occupiers are unlikely to try to invade Belarus again, as it would take too much time and resources. A former advisor to Vladimir Putin, Russian economist Andriy Illarionov, claims that the Kremlin is soon preparing to start a new phase of the war, with large-scale military operations and new weapons that have not been used before. Preparations started on September 17. Preparations for the transition to a new stage of the war lasted for 3 months, unlike the group that was involved until February 24, 2022, approximately 220,000. Today's group probably has 3 times more, 600 to 700,000. They are armed no worse than they were a year ago. Besides, according to Putin's statements, they will now use weapons that have not been used on the battlefield so far, he said. According to him, on December 15, Putin held a secret meeting that decided to move to a new stage of the war. Polish General Waldemar Skrzypczak believes that Russia can attack Ukraine from its own territory, and the Belarusian direction will only divert attention. In his opinion, the probability of a new Russian ground offensive exists. The Russians are conducting a large mobilization for this and have a reserve of 1.2 million people. Of them, 300,000 mobilized are undergoing appropriate training. Russian activity in Belarus near the Ukrainian border indicates that an attack on Ukraine from the north will not be carried out now. But this threat may increase significantly already in the fall. The United States does not see the prerequisites for a new large-scale offensive by Russia and hopes that the new weapons transferred to Ukraine can change the situation on the battlefield. Russian troops have spread from Kharkiv to Kherson, and we do not see the appearance of new offensive groups. So it's hard for to guess what the battlefield will be like now. However, now we don't see a big Russian offensive coming. At the same time, the colonel believes that Russia has the ability to wage a long war. The main battlefield will be in Donbas, says Skibitsky. The spring and early summer of 2023 will be decisive in the full-scale war launched by the Russian Federation under the leadership of dictator Vladimir Putin. The main battlefield will be in Donbas. Clearly, Putin cannot afford to lose this war. This will lead to the inevitable collapse of Russia and Putin himself. Recall that U.S. officials advise Ukraine not to launch a major offensive against the positions of the Russian armed forces until the armed forces of Ukraine receive all the announced American weapons. This was reported in Reuters on January 20, citing administration spokesman Joe Biden. Ukraine and the West are planning to weaken the offensive potential of the Russian Federation to go on a counteroffensive with the already available amount of armored vehicles and reserves. Ukraine needs an immediate supply of tanks, but so far only discussions are underway. Ukraine needs to get enough Western tanks and tell how Russia will prepare for the new offensive expected this spring. The Ukrainian military will soon begin training on Challenger 2 tanks in the UK. This was stated by the ambassador of Ukraine to Britain. The crews are about to start training in the UK. Crews of heavy artillery systems are already training, and tankers will arrive soon. According to the diplomat, this will not take long, because, according to British instructors, the Ukrainian military is motivated and learns very quickly. It takes 5 weeks to train infantrymen. Hard to say, how many tankers will need to be trained? All the more so these are artillerymen and mechanics and commanders. I think that in a month and a half you can handle it. If necessary, training will continue as it was before. Pristeko stressed that the tanks are already being prepared for shipment to Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and support our channel on Patreon. Strength to you and good luck.